I've got some shocking news about what looks like political meddling at the National Energy Board. It seems like the executive director of the NEB was actively trying to save the Liberals from political fallout after the cancellation of Energy East. And we've got the exclusive emails to prove it. Remember when TransCanada pulled the plug on their Energy East pipeline project just 2 weeks after the Liberals added downstream greenhouse gas considerations into the National Energy Board, or NEB, approval process for their pipeline? It was and remains absolute craziness to make a transport company responsible for the end user of a product. And really, that's all TransCanada is. It's a transport company for a product. It's like making a trucking company responsible for the extra plastic packaging on the toys that it ultimately delivers to Walmart. Insane, right? But the Liberals thought this was a great idea. Innovative even, because they are, virtue signaling environmentalists constantly trying to curry favor with the United Nations. Well, we started looking into the National Energy Board and what was happening in the immediate days after TransCanada signaled that they were considering canceling their pipeline project. And you will absolutely not believe what we found out. TransCanada initially suspended their pipeline application September 7th, 2017. At 3:25 in the afternoon on September 8th, the National Energy Board became aware that TransCanada had requested a 30-day suspension to the review of both Energy East and their Eastern Mainline pipeline project. TransCanada also announced that they had already stopped funding the project August 23rd, around the exact same time the Liberals had announced that greenhouse gas emissions would be a consideration in the approval of Energy East. TransCanada would then go on to completely withdraw their applications for their projects on October 5th, 2017. And we know through press releases from TransCanada that the addition of downstream greenhouse gas emissions considerations were the reason for the suspension of their project. It's right here in black and white. TransCanada said the initial 30-day suspension was to, and I quote, allow time to conduct a careful review of recent changes announced by the NEB regarding the list of issues and environmental assessment factors of the projects, while understanding how these changes will impact the project's cost, schedules, and viability, end quote. So we filed a Freedom of Information request into the National Energy Board for their emails in the aftermath of all of this. How are they going to deal with TransCanada potentially ending a nearly $16 billion nation-building pipeline project? Well, the NEB went directly into covering for the Liberals and actively looking for excuses on behalf of the Liberals. I want to show you this email from Josée Touchette. At the time, she was the top bureaucrat at Canada's pipeline regulator. She was the chief operating officer at the National Energy Board. And she sent an email Sunday morning, September 10th, right after the suspension of the pipeline at 9:05 to her fellow bureaucrats. You know this email is important because bureaucrats working for the federal government certainly don't do much in the way of work on a Sunday morning. Anyway, here's the email. Sorry to trouble you on a Sunday morning. Is it possible to find out how many submissions the panel has received on emissions during the various comment periods they have had so far? I confess I have lost track of how many comment periods there have been so far. If we have that information, are we able to distinguish between upstream and downstream? I'm trying to determine whether there has been a public demand for that type of examination. Also, I have heard that the Keystone panel had looked at downstream in some way, shape, or form and had been able to establish that, if built, the Keystone XL would allow for better product, i.e. not from countries that are less preoccupied about the carbon footprint to flow. Does that ring a bell? I'm not looking for super detailed information, more high level, but as quickly as possible. Many thanks in advance, Josée. What it seems Touchette is looking for here is political cover to offer the Liberals for bringing in those downstream greenhouse gas emissions targets that resulted in the suspension of the pipeline application by TransCanada. Touchette knows that the Liberals haven't even bothered to concern themselves with whether or not there was a public demand or outcry for including downstream emissions in the pipeline approval process. She herself doesn't even know if the public asked for any of this. Touchette even calls oil from countries that are preoccupied with their carbon footprint better product. So we know exactly where she's coming from here. Then, in another email sent about 15 minutes later on that same Sunday morning, again to other NEB bureaucrats, it's clear that Touchette was in a rush and she wasn't going to wait around for her fellow bureaucrat colleagues to respond to her. She needs to cover for the Liberals and cover for them quickly. Her email reads, "Hi again. I did a bit of digging on the Keystone XL study, and I think it is a review that was done by the State Department in the early days of the Obama administration that looked at downstream impacts. Can you confirm this information, please, and give me a sense of what they examined and what they concluded? Many thanks in advance, Jose." So Touchette was eager to use Obama's environmental reasoning for vetoing Keystone XL, despite approval from his own State Department, as an excuse for the Liberals putting prohibitive and deterrent downstream greenhouse gas considerations into the new NEB process. Who was Touchette working for, the NEB or Catherine McKenna? Touchette was working overtime on a Sunday morning to give the Liberals a problem for their solution. Now, I don't know who asked Josée Touchette for that information or if she was just trying to cover for the Liberals on her own, and I will continue my investigation to see if I can find that information out for you. But I can tell you, Touchette moved on from her role at the NEB after she hired a private investigator to dig into the rest of the NEB for leaking the fact that she told a bad joke about protesters to the media. I'll keep digging and I'll keep covering the politicization of Canada's nonpartisan federal agencies, and we will keep exposing the partisan Liberals working within them. For the Rebel.media, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Did you know that we have a Rebel Media mobile app? You can get it on the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Download it, give it a try, and bring the other side of the story with you wherever you go.